Diane, asking, sort of just helping people with their dogs and integrating lots of things. And I remember when we were in Australia, I really enjoyed your presentation. It was so rich.
Oh, thank you so much. And ditto that with yours, because I think that was a movement and that was fascinating.
Yeah. And Peter Clark is actually, it was interesting because she came to one of my workshops there, and she had really had help with one of her little dogs from working with you.
Yes, yeah, her little Broadway dog.
Yeah.
Her little Chihuahua. Yeah, everything changes, doesn't it, when we address our dogs differently and when we touch them in different way. It's almost as if we can communicate better to them through the way that we are presenting ourselves to them. And T-Touch is pretty amazing in that aspect. And of course, as you mentioned, used in a canine emotional detox, where we're trying to release stress in the dogs that are either acutely stressed or chronically stressed, where they just cannot come down. And then that's when you have your big problems, not just behaviorally, but health-wise as well.
So. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's only really in the last, it's still fairly recent that people have started to recognize that the kind of emotional things, well, even pain. I remember in the 90s when Linda made the statement at that time, primarily about horses, but also dogs, is that she felt that about 90% of the bad behavior, or the behavior we don't like, that she felt that it came from fear, pain, or fear of pain. And you can't separate them. You can't separate them at all. And I think memory of pain, for humans know that, like, you get put back in a situation that can really trigger a response that you thought was gone, because maybe you're even healed, and yet right. It still comes back.
Well, as the scientist Ledoux says, it is a matter of life and death. And so what happens is it goes straight to the amygdala, whatever is happening, and it stays there. So it never goes away. We just have to build new neural pathways of doing something different. And I think, really that's what Tellington Touch does. And as you have always said to me, Tellington Touch is more than body work.
So. Well, and I think it's interesting because they're finding, certainly with people too, that have, say, post-traumatic stress disorder and so on, is that movement, somatic mindful movement, is proving to be really effective in terms of helping people overcome and release some of the stress. And so I think that mindful movement is so important, whether it's with people or with animals.
Yes, that's so true. Would you like to get to your presentation? Sure. Now, just to give a little background and what T-Touch is? Or...
let's see if I'm going to show this, just a second. So some of you obviously will know this because you've been, some of you that are here have been involved for a while. This is just our online course. What I find so interesting is we've been able to take the practitioner course online, and I'm really surprised at how many people are. We have a student in India, and she's doing an amazing job, and she'll never be able to come in live, but she sends a lot of video back. So, I just kind of put this in, where can T-Touch be used? And we know that if you've been around it, it can be used in so many places, but reducing stress and anxiety, and not only for the animal, but for the people as well, can help to build confidence with pregnant bitches and puppies, adolescents, training classes, dog sports, senior dogs, vet care, shelters, really anytime that you want to help improve your relationship. We really consider the connection between physical, emotional, and mental balance, and you can't separate them. And you can really see, for instance, dogs that are reacting to things or emotional weight, there'll be a posture that goes along with that. And so we find that we can really help. The T-Touch bodywork for sure can help release some of that emotion, release some of the stress. We also know that slow movement exercises can activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And when we can, it also helps to actually build memory and muscle at a deeper level than fast work does. Plus, people who do sports with their dogs will find that actually the dogs get faster by going slower. So we really recognize that link between posture and behavior. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of our things. Our goals of T-Touch, we talk about improving self-carriage, which is posture, which can help to improve self-confidence, which helps to improve self-control. And I've had people say to me, but, oh, my dog, is so overly confident. And they're kind of viewing what they're seeing as confident is behavior that we would look at as being rather lacking in confidence. And we know that it can help to resolve health, behavioral, and training issues. And the beauty of it is it can really be used with any animal. I love this picture of this cat and this dog. And we can use this to help really deepen and foster clear communication between animals and people. And I think that this sort of misunderstanding and lack of communication is something that is, really happens in all the animal world. And I think it's always interesting when people have think they know what their animal is saying or why they have a certain behavior. We can barely understand each other when we speak the same language. And yet we think that somehow, we're supposed to understand what a different species, let alone a different language means. We want to actually help people treat their animals and their people with equal respect and understanding, because I think that in most cases, people and animals are doing the best they can with what they know. So we can help to influence the positive behavioral changes and promote well-being through reducing stress. This is a slide that one of our instructors put together, and I really kind of love this, the components of T-Touch, because we have approach and handling, we have body work, we have different equipment, we have groundwork elements. Observation and feedback are always a constant with that, as is this philosophy of respect. And the word respect, the root word of it means to see or to look again. And I know for sure in the horse world, that's not how it's, it's not how it's used. And I think it's something that's really helpful to remember. So observation, we want to pay attention to an animal's posture. We want to notice, how do they respond to contact? What are their small expressions of concern? It's, if we listen to whispers, then they don't have to shout, but we tend to think that animals give us no warning when oftentimes they give us a lot. We just haven't been able to see it. We can learn a lot by looking at coat patterns, and it's not so much the pattern is there a change in the pattern? Is there a change in the color? Is there a change in the texture in certain parts? The skin and hair is the largest organ in the body. So if we think of that, we can really have a lot of influence by watching and looking at that, and also by making mindful contact. The more that we can pause whatever we're doing, that allows the animal to give us feedback about what the experience is like for them. So we can look at, when we're looking at the body in terms of observation, we want to look at the movement, posture, tension, hair patterns, their response to touch, and also their response to unfamiliar situations. Because, context is everything. And just for ourselves as well, we may be completely comfortable singing in the shower at home. Doesn't mean that we're going to go on stage somewhere. So when we change the context, we really change the experience. We can also look for the physiological, for the respiration rate, the heart rate. Notice, do you have a dog that has a really dry mouth, or do they have this? Do they always have to be chewing on something and they have a really wet mouth? We can feel the extremities. Are they cold places? Are there hot places? Are their eyes pinched? Are their ears level? We can notice those things. And again, it's not to make a judgment about it, but if we notice something's there, or maybe we might notice that, that is different than it used to be. That can be super helpful in really getting to the bottom of certain things. We can look at characteristics that might be indications of concern, excessive licking, chewing, urination, vocalization, all the things that we know that are communication signals that dogs give us. And then we can use, if the dog's comfortable, we can use our hands to really feel the body. And I encourage people to start with the back of the hand and actually go slowly. And I often have said to people that I watch sometimes the way people interact with the best intention. And if they did that to a person, they would probably be charged with assault. And sometimes they do it with animals that they actually don't know well, because maybe the animal is seemingly to be happy about the situation. Go slowly, and you might be really surprised if you notice that as you go to certain places, your dog suddenly starts to sit down and move away, or kind of fool around. Go back to where they were quiet. And that'll help you notice if maybe you're getting to places that they're not quite as okay as we thought they were. So of course we have the body work, and that is what most people know of about the T-Touch. So this mindful, gentle body work, and it includes circular movement, lifts and slides, and non-habitual movement with the extremities. And it's really important, the whole concept of non-habitual. So habits, so that habits are bad, because that's how we can get through life without it taking us forever, say, to get dressed.
Melon.
Sorry? Oh, but maybe if we want to change a habit, what do we have to do? We have to do something that's different. So habits bypass the thinking part of our brain. So in order for us to change a habit, we need to gently move them into more novel experiences. It can't be too extreme. It has to be done really easily. We think about working with the nerves or the nervous system rather than with the muscular system. And that's one of the differences in doing the body work, is where it's not a massage, but it's rather a message. And we're looking to give a message to the nervous system. And it's what we know is that if we reduce attention, it can help change how they feel. And how we feel will be pretty closely related to how we act. Now, the T-Touch, Linda's primary interest in this was to work at a cellular level. And this is in terms of with the circular touches. And in the late 90s, she read a book by Candace Pert, and the book's called Molecules of Emotion. And she won a Nobel Prize for her work. And in what she did is she proved that emotions are held in the cells. And what she also noticed, and of course she did this in a laboratory, so she somehow, how she did this, she used probably mice or rats. So I think that's sort of interesting when you have people who still think animals don't have emotions, because you kind of can't have it both ways. And what Candace Pert noticed is that how you could release fear, because fear is one of the emotions that's held in the cell, was through gentle contact. And it wasn't necessarily through T-Touch, but T-Touch is a form of gentle contact that's done in a mindful way. So we are, the hallmark is our circular touches, so that we're moving the tissue in approximately a circle and a quarter, rather than sliding over it. So we're not like rubbing across the hair. So the pressure would be as light as would be comfortable with you making like contact on your cheekbone or your eyelid. And I just very simply, if you think about, if you use different parts of your hand, it's going to feel different. So the tips of the fingers, the circle is going to be smaller and more precise and probably lighter. We can use the palm of our hand, which is going to help to diffuse the contact. And we can use the back of our hand, which is less intense and less threatening. So if you don't really even have to know too much about it, but you can still start to pay attention to what you're doing and how you're making contact. So we also have what we call sliding touches. And the simplest thing that you can do is what we call, it was called originally the zigzag. And to give it an animal name, we change it to the zebra. And it's literally making this like opening and closing your fingers as you make contact across the shoulders, the barrel, and the hips. And you can go kind of from the front of the dog towards the back. It can help you check out areas of concern. And it gives people a really simple way of making contact that may be a little different than their usual way of making contact. And I love teaching the zebra because it is it really is not so different, and it's not so different for the dogs either, because sometimes if you get too mindful, it can be a little creepy for some dogs. So you want to give them something that is different, but not too different. So ear T-touch is something that I would say most people that have a dog, their dog comes and sticks their head in their lap and they sort of instinctively stroke the ears. And there are about 200 acupressure points in the ear. So making sure that your dog's comfortable with it. If you slide from the base of the ear out toward the tip, you can really help to calm dogs, to settle them. If a dog's been injured or you're taking them to the vet, do the ear T-touch, because it gives you something to do, and it can really help with if an animal is going into shock, it can really help keep them more stable. And that's one of the most important things, is that it's the condition that either your dog arrives at the vet, or you know, if the vet comes to your house, that can make a difference in their survival. So we know that it can settle a nervous animal, can be really helpful with digestive issues, with noise reactivity, car sickness, fantastic for car sickness, while you're taking your animal to the vet, during whelping, or to settle an animal coming out of an anesthetic. It can make it so much, they can come out so much more smoothly. So the mouth T-touch, the mouth is one of the closest connections we have to the limbic system, which is a primary controller of our really basic emotion. So we can help with mouthy puppies, great for basic handling for the vet and for teeth brushing, or if you happen to show your dog so that the judges don't like, even if a judge isn't quite so polite, the dog's comfortable with it. We found that it's helpful for fear or hyperactivity and nervousness, with chronic barkers, chewers, and for biting. Now, what I suggest to people do now is, yes, if you can go in the mouth, great. Start at the back of the jaw. Start, because that's where so many dogs get tight. And if you start with the back of your fingers and you start making touch around that jaw area, you can often move your way forward in a way that's really comfortable. We often like to talk about doing any of this in moments rather than minutes. So it's not how much you can do, it's do a little bit and then take a pause. So we have lots of tools. We have body wraps, which I think most of you have seen, the balance leash and the balance leash press, appropriate fitting harnesses that have front and back attachments. In the last few years, the Harmony leash and handle has been really helpful, as well as the T-touch connector. Oh, this came in here. This is going to come here. So this is just a few of the wraps. The picture that was before, this is, over the last few years, I found that adding a very small back wrap that just hangs with a little kind of knot at the end is easier for many dogs to accept than having something that goes fully around the hind end or around their legs. And I've actually found that this is a half wrap with the yellow wrap, or the quarter wrap. Well, this is a half wrap too, are wraps that I use absolutely most frequently. We can also do what we call a forehead wrap and a face wrap, which you can use sewing elastic or different things with. We used to use this face wrap far more frequently. And what I found is I had a dog once he was a nervous little dog, and we had a face wrap on, and I can't remember, it was many years ago, and he took his paw and he pushed it up to his forehead. And it was interesting because he was just as quiet and way more accepting with forehead wrap as he was with the face wrap. And later at one of our advanced trainings, one of our practitioners who's a vet as well, a holistic vet, she said, well, that's really interesting because the forehead is connected to the governing vessel, and it runs along the whole top line, and it has the effect of calming. So maybe that's why the forehead wrap was actually really effective. The face wrap, especially with some kind of soft nylon, so that the dog, if they need to get it off, to me, that's really acceptable. The other thing I frequently use are two stretchy headbands put together so that they're also quite soft. But if you are training your dog to wear a muzzle, or if they need to wear a head collar, whatever it is, this is a great starting point. So they're just comfortable with things around their face. So some of the benefits of body wraps to improve proprioception, when we know where we are in space, it makes us feel safer, and feeling safe is just absolutely critical in terms of us being able to act differently. Of course, it helps with posture. It can create relaxation or calmness, can be helpful for thunder or noise phobia. And of course, the thunder shirt got its start with body wraps, and they wanted to find something that was, maybe more acceptable for some people. And certainly it is great for many dogs. And I would have to say that I think the body wrap can be a great start for the thunder shirt, because some dogs are a little bit not so comfortable with the thunder shirt. Some are very comfortable. It's also wonderful for preparation for a harness. Horses or dogs tend to be harness shy, again for car sickness, and it just gives them a new experience.
Let me jump in a little bit here before we go on.
Yeah.
Let's take 5 minutes to talk about what you've just been saying, and maybe people will have some questions as well. But there is a technique where I'm a guild certified Tellington Touch practitioner for everyone, and I know a lot of people on here. We have a technique where we watch the movement of the dog up and back, and that was quite telling when you're looking at a dog. Are they limping on their right side? Do you see any clipping over an obstacle? And it just has a lot to do with movement. And it does so much reduce tension. I can't tell you, the pit bulls that I worked with this past weekend, T-Touch was absolutely instrumental in getting those dogs to go from hyperactivity and overexcitement to deep REM sleep, basically, after they had T-Touch and wraps. Was very instrumental, and I just love how that works.
Fantastic.
So when Robyn was talking about the head wrap, when I met Robyn, it was at the Argus Ranch, I think, with Chancellor.
Mhm.
Robyn knows Chancellor on
Yeah.
a one-on-one basis, and everyone really tried to help there. Robyn came out and showed me the head wrap, and let me tell you something, that is the one single element that helped Chancellor really relax and really come to a level where he could actually see better and not be so worried, and he would stop and think. But he later on, and you probably don't know this, but we did head wraps all the time, and he would lie down and sleep with the head wrap on, because it was so soothing and it was so calming. So while it might look strange, never think that, because what's happening there is that calming, there's a calming center there, and it does do exactly that. And especially for dogs that might have neurological problems like Chancellor did have.
Yes, that's something very interesting, and we have so many tools, because not everything works with every dog or at every moment or whatever. So there's just a lot of choice. In our Italian training, one of the students they all had to do a little presentation on something. And so this woman is an engineer, which explains why she did this. So she took 3 yoga mats, and she put a thin layer of flour on each of the yoga mats, and they were separated by a couple of feet. And I think she used 13 dogs in her study. And on the first yoga mat, they would walk across with nothing on, no wrap on, just as normal. The second one, they went across with like a quarter or half wrap, I can't remember exactly. And the third with just a head wrap. What was interesting is, and they had 5 neurological dogs in that. That's what made me think about this study. And the wrap that made the most difference to their movement pattern was the head wrap. which
I have no doubt about that. Yeah.
yeah, so really interesting. So dogs also that have, if you've got dogs that are having a vestibular condition or an episode, a half wrap and the head wrap can be super helpful for those dogs in sort of settling them, or dogs that have issues with maybe their with thunder and lightning, and maybe the thunder shirt or wrap helps. I found that the head wrap then can make that next level of difference for some dogs.
Yeah, and it's less intrusive than like a calming cap, which
Yeah.
I find very intrusive when I've tried it. A head wrap is much better. So yeah, all of these things, you have to try them, and oftentimes we are cynical about these things that are happening. I see Cindy Van Vliet in the audience, and Cindy was also very instrumental to me. There was a little dog at the Oregon Humane Society, and she had just been brought in, and she was blind, and she was trying to bite everybody. And Cindy wanted me to pick her up, and I said, no, I'm not picking her up.
Show me.
I don't know if you remember this, but so we finally got it to where we could pick her up, and we took her in a conference room for 15 minutes. And Cindy worked her magic on this little dog, Touch. We did some treats. We got her a princess bed. It's just a little tiny dog. And in that 15 minutes, that dog completely changed.
Wow.
Absolutely changed. We did a wrap and many other things, and maybe Cindy will recall that of what we did. But I've seen since then so many miraculous things happen with changing dogs without using any obedience or anything, and just the way that we're responding or reacting and touching our dog, walking with them, taking them over obstacles. All of that was just so compelling. And I just want to add one last thing, then let's get back to the PowerPoint. When we say all animals, we mean all animals. And I think Robyn was in the at the ranch, because with the boa constrictor that came in, and so you wanted me to do Touch on the boa constrictor. And I said, what? Touching that boa constrictor. And so everybody didn't ever push me or say anything. I just stood off and I watched and saw everybody else having success, like we would do with our dogs, right? We would have them watch things from a distance and reward them. And then pretty soon I was not afraid anymore to have this snake draped over my lap, and we were doing Touch and watching that snake's head and tail come down, like totally relaxing in our laps instead of twirling around and, going somewhere. It's absolutely amazing.
It is. And you're so right, Diane. It is. We have to treat the people as we would treat the animals, with that same kind of, if you're afraid, it's the whole thing is we can't ask the dogs exactly this, but what we would say to people, because we did lots of works with reptiles in different places and lots of different animals, and is to say, what would make you feel safe? And it's, maybe for some people, it would be being out of the room or in a completely different room, but certainly not seeing them. And there were people that even if you mentioned the word snake, their heart would start to palpitate.
Oh, yeah, I was that one.
Well, and so it's, it really is. It really does teach you that you just have to, anyone can say, oh, that's so silly because they're not poisonous, but it isn't silly to you.
No, it wasn't silly to me. And I had a fear.
Yeah.
And so when we go through things like this, we understand our dogs more and what they're going through as well. So if you would have made me go over to that snake, I would have run away. I would have said, no, I'm going home, right?
Yeah.
I'm out of here. But you handled it in a different way that we should be handling our dogs, letting them see their triggers and stimuli from a distance, and then letting them ease into getting safer, feeling safer, having more success with that particular trigger. And I see Sandra Rosado in here too, and she was very well aware of Chancellor as well. And I told Sandra at it was the same Touch practitioner training that we were at. I said, stay away from Valor, or not Valor, Chancellor.
Yeah.
And so Sandra came a little bit too close to the X-Pen, and Chancellor leaped at her. And so, you know, we don't always hear what we try things without really, you know, what am I trying to say? we try things without having really any knowledge or thinking that something bad can happen. And I think that's why pet parents do the things that they do, is because they don't know exactly what could happen if they handle something in a different way. So,
yeah, and I think you can also, like, things like that, things can happen where you do something and you're not thinking about, you're not even doing anything with any negative intention. And then it's like you're either an animal, you're too close to an animal or whatever. And then they may react and you might not even have any idea that, that was going to happen. So.
Well, it's all very telling, and Sandra was very helpful in working with Chancellor. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Right.
So let's go back to the PowerPoint and finish that.
Okay, let's see. This should work. Oops, now I have a Luna, you'll have to go upstairs. But I have a barking dog. She is, I'm not sure who just came in the house, but I think she's gonna go up.
Probably hears us talking.
Yes. No, she's a very good watchdog. She was a failed foster. So the balance leash, if you aren't familiar with this, any of you aren't, it is one of the it's one of the simplest and most useful tools I think that we have. And you know, there's some dogs and some people that maybe they, for whatever reason, the dog can't wear a harness or they don't want to. If you teach them this balance leash, to just be able to drop that around the middle of the chest to get the pressure off the dog's neck, it can make such a difference for those surprise moments where my dog's okay 90% of the time. Maybe my dog at the vet, you want to help them stay calmer. You want to help them stay over their feet, because when they're over their feet and in their own balance, they'll feel safer. And feeling safe is one of the most important needs that has to be met for all of us, for sure. If we can, maybe when I use this frequently, if I'm asking to contain a dog a little bit and just say, hey, could you just stay with me for a moment, rather than having pressure on their neck. And it's a really useful tool. At the vets, teaching this to vet techs or groomers, it's such a brilliant and such an easy technique. Let's see if I can find my little thing. There we go. And some dogs.
I just used that last week.
Did you? Yeah, cool. And with little dogs, sometimes it slides up too high, or some dogs who back out of it. So then we'll just put it around the opposite, the elbow of the opposite front leg, and then up through the collar. And it acts a little bit like a harness for dogs. So this can also be really helpful. I have a little video at that near the end. I'm going to show you a dog that was very pulley, and it helped him immediately. So, you know, the leash and handle, when I started using the Freedom Dog harnesses, what I really liked is they had 2 points of contact, because we were very early on in using 2 points of contact. And we would teach people to have, a hand on each end of the leash. But what I found is that with clients, they would do it maybe in when they're with you, but when they go home, they're not going to use it so much. So I really like this idea of the handle that slid. The limitation that I felt was that I wanted it more adjustable, so I could make it a little longer and a little shorter. And they weren't interested, because they felt it was correct for what they were doing. So anyway, that's why I started making them. 2 points are better than one, for sure, because a single point means that you have less choice. It limits your ability to influence them. So the back of the harness can trigger forward, which you want sometimes. The front of the ring may impede forward movement, but the dog's out of balance. And, I remember when the sensation harnesses came in, and the thing I noticed about them is that they sat very low on the shoulders, and that, yes, they stopped the dog from pulling, but they only did it because they pulled the dog out of balance. And what I said at the time is that in a few years, you're going to find out that dogs have problems with their elbows on the opposite side from where you're leading them. And sure enough. So in the 90s, we started using 2 points of contact, probably because we also worked with horses and we realized that when you had 2 ways to influence them, it could make a difference. So it really allows you to influence movement, but without putting the dog out of balance. So then when the leash and handle allowed people to use one hand rather than 2, and I'm sure that Sandra and Cindy and Diane, you remember, all the practice we did with 2 hands on the leash.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'll tell you what, I had a lot of resistance when I went to the handle because people had spent a lot of time learning to do it. What I found is that, again, the clients wouldn't do it, or if you're walking 2 dogs or you're pushing a baby carriage or carrying groceries, it wasn't practical. The handle slides back and forth, which avoids a hard pull on it, either one. And so I found that it really helped to reduce the opposition response. And nervous handlers could really hold tightly without sending that message down the leash. Now, this will work. This is kind of a fun video. This is one of our practitioners. She has a dog training school, and she had these 2 clients, and these are 2 little dogs who live together. And they are, oh, but just a second, you might not be able to hear the noise because I think I didn't turn it on. Anyway, so you won't be able to hear the noise. So she wanted to try them with this is how they normally were. This is normally on they're barking like crazy. So then she said, well, let's try different combinations. So this is just with the leash and handle, and instantly they just changed, which was like pretty unexpected and a little bit amusing, actually. And you can't hear it, but at one point she goes, well, if she pulls, you can just move. And she goes, oh, she's not pulling at all. So anyway, this was a kind of immediate dramatic response that happens sometimes. Like everything, some things happen really quickly and some things take a little more practice. So from the leash and handle came this concept of what I call the T-Touch connector. And it came actually from a woman who came to our course in Finland, and she had 4 border terriers. And she went home and she wanted to walk all 4 together. And she wanted to use this concept of, 2 points of contact. And so her friend who made dog equipment said, well, what about if we shorten this up? What if we shortened that, and then we could attach the end of one leash to this dog, and then the other end, like this end, it would be attached to another dog who also had a connector. And it worked brilliantly. She was able to walk 4 dogs together with 2 leashes. And so I got a few from her, and then I thought, well, I would also like to make it adjustable, only because she makes great connectors. And if it's for 1 dog, it's perfect. But if you have multiple dogs, sometimes it's nice to have that adjustability. So it's similar to the leash and handle, and I'll show you a little video of how it works. And what I think happens is, because it's shorter, the physics of it really divide the pressure between the front and the back of the harness. Like it slides a little more smoothly because we're not attached to it. Because what you do is then you can attach quite a long leash. So it's my experience that dogs that are really forward going or reactive to things, is you want to have them on a longer leash in a safe place so that they can actually find their balance rather than always hitting the end of that leash and it being out of balance. And so it gave you a lot of ability to really influence the dog in an easy way. And it's been, people who have had very little coaching with it, many people have found it really helpful. So this is a 8-month-old lab, purchased and brought into the home during COVID, had his only experience with other dogs was being taken to a very rowdy dog park, and he was off his head because then he'd go from the dog park to having to come home and having to be in a crate most of the day while she worked from home. So it was not an ideal situation. Lovely person who cared a lot. She had done lots of dog training, lots of positive training. She had she was using some kind of a no pull harness, and that worked well to start with, and then till he figured out how he could pull with it. And then so before I saw her, she was also using a head collar, which again worked all right for her. But he couldn't sniff at all, and he was not particularly enthusiastic about his walk. So the first thing that we showed her was the balance leash. She came to the house for a thing. So this is him not pulling very badly, but what you can see is how out of balance he is. His body is going one way, his feet are another, his legs are all over the place. So I showed her how to drop the balance leash around the chest. Get the pressure off his collar, and you can see that he's walking in better balance. He's not leaning. He's engaging with me a little bit, which was nice. And then when I stopped him, I did just a little bit of touch, because he's got such an interesting tail. If you notice how stiff that is. He was standing quietly, which was very unusual for him. And I wanted to go over his body and notice, were there places that he started to get a little bit overly aroused? And the family, they have young children, and he's very nice with them, but they were very excitable, and the dog was always over the top, always jumping up, always mouthing, and so on. So I got her to do a little bit with the balance leash, because it doesn't matter if I can do it, it's only helpful if she can. And she said that this was extremely helpful for her in those situations where she just kind of needed him to stay by her in certain times, but without him getting super aroused. And then she wanted to we tried the harness, and we put the connector on him. And I took him, I'll show you just for a moment. So this little tab along here slides. And I just used her leash. And I can let him, if he pulls a little bit, I can just let it slide out for a moment. And then I can stroke the leash a little bit to bring him around. But he was walking really nicely. So I took him out, because, it's okay if he's in an enclosed area that he's fine, but we want to take him out. We have a lot of animals here. We have sheep that were running around, bad lambs. We have cows that were mooing, and horses, and so on. So I just turned him a little bit, stroked the leash, and moved my feet. To stop, I use a little up, because I want the signal to be coming from the chest, but in an upward way, not a sideways way. And then I handed it to her. And she did a great job. I just did a little bit of coaching. And she was shocked, because she said he never walks like that. So that was a nice little stroke. There's sheep in the distance and horses fighting. So she just stepped a bit, and then he came with her, which was really nice to see.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so nice the way she disconnected him from that so quietly. And that's what we want. We want them to want to come with us, right? Not to have to come with us. And of
So
course,
she didn't have to do any pulling.
Yeah.
It's stroking, and I love how the pointed finger is communicating with the dog and letting him know which way we're going, and you know. Beautiful.
It was so nice to see. And she said, but this isn't my dog, because he's never walked like this. So, and we had a lot of distractions. And I also showed her just a little bit of touch to just calm down the way that she was interacting. She loved this dog. And she did a really nice job with it. I mean, and that was nice. She didn't just pull, she just let him have a look. He didn't pull towards anything, and off he came. So anyway, that was really, she was a fun person to work with. So you mentioned this a little bit too, Diane, this playground of higher learning that we have, and you can use all sorts of things. Our sort of primary thing is what we call a labyrinth, where we, move dogs through it. in a mindful way. We see, can they walk through it, not as an obedience thing, but can they walk and stop and turn? We'll tell you if your dog's really tight on one side versus the other. Is your dog comfortable walking between things? You can also, I love using cones because dogs that have a tendency to be reactive are generally very tight through the rib cage, and bending is not so easy for them. So it's a great, easy exercises for them to do. We use this going through the labyrinth and walking over things, whatever you happen to have. I've actually started to use bicycle tires, not obviously to have things walk on, but for the dogs to walk on, because they are so much easier than using big car tires. And the bike companies are happy to get rid of them. So they're easy to transport and you can use them in a variety of ways. So we have lots of novel ways. This is a thing we call the butterfly. And again, this novelty, it can seem like chaos to start with. And the changes that I've seen with so many dogs has been phenomenal. I couldn't tell you what's going to happen before, but I've seen a lot of things happen after. And then, of course, when we talk about applied T-Touch, because lots of times people will just kind of do a little bit and a little bit of this and a little bit of that and really notice a difference. And they don't know necessarily that you can also apply it to things like nail trimming, when we can help to chunk things down so they're comfortable about having touches down their legs. We might use a paintbrush or a feather or something different to work our way down. I think, this is my little soapbox, I think grooming is one of the most important things we can do with dogs. And I don't mean getting them clean and well groomed. I mean how we groom. And I think that when dogs, people will say, oh yeah, my dog's fine at the groomers. Yeah, well, they don't actually know, because the dog goes in, the dog knows the deal. Dog's not necessarily comfortable. Some get really worse in lots of other behaviors. So I've worked with many people with helping their dogs be more comfortable with groomers. And we had a very clever practitioner who went into the grooming salon and offered to show her groomers T-Touch so that they could groom her dog. And it made such a difference to the groomers and to the dogs that they groomed. Of course, we know that it can help with, this is nearly over here, noise, reactivity, car sickness, shyness, overexcitability, and vet visits, which again is really helpful. So this was, we had a wonderful vet for years. He passed a couple of years ago, and he was a horse vet to start with. And then he's written a lot of great articles. And he told me that when he first started doing T-Touch with adding it to his practice, that he used so much less sedatives and tranquilizers for horses, that it made such a difference. And this was his kind of perspective, is that with continued exposure to T-Touch, animals develop more ability to operate in a calm, focused mode. Their responses to new situations become less automatic and more considered. Animals learn to learn. More body and environmental awareness yields more adaptability and more appropriate action. And isn't that what we're looking to work with our animals, so that they can live in our lives? Because we ask a lot of animals in terms of having to adapt to us. And if we can make them, help them become more adaptable and more resilient, to me, that's one of the biggest things that we can do. Therefore, they become more trainable. They want to be with us and they can do more things. And Diane mentioned our website. This is, we have the ttouch.ca, and then our online platform is on learn.ttouch.ca. So anyway, I'll stop this.
Very good. I'm going to be speaking with some groomers on March 5th. So teaching a little bit of T-Touch and other things. And so that was very compelling when you said that it's not that they have to love, it's not that they have to look, good. It's how you're grooming them.
Oh,
that
it is
really good statement. Yeah.
So important. So important. And I have had so many dogs come on to the people that have come onto the online course that that were very difficult, not just to groom, because oftentimes grooming sensitivity is connected to touch sensitivity, to harness sensitivity, to all kinds of things. And when we can, I think it's kind of like ground zero in a way.
Yeah.
Really how that they're comfortable, and it's not just, that we get the job done, but how we get it done.
Exactly. And I think you answered the two questions that we were going over, how it affects movement, and proprioception is a very important concept to understand, and that dogs don't always know where they are or what is expected of them in a position that we want them to be. So asking what we can do instead, and showing them what we want them to do instead is so important. The lab on the connector was very compelling, because he wasn't pulling out, and he was really mindful of where his owner and where you were in that space, and following your body language as well. So when you move your feet, a lot of people, when you're teaching this, they don't understand to move their feet on the human end of the leash, but that makes every bit of difference in helping the dog to move with you, not against you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just finished putting together a course about walking on the leash, and there's a whole segment on helping handlers, helping handlers be in better balance. So that because if we're in a water ski position, if we're hollow through the back, if we're tight through the back, it's going to be uncomfortable for us and way less effective. We're putting the dog constantly then out of balance. And so the more that we can change ourselves, because I will say to people is that there's only one thing on this earth that you have the potential to control, and that's yourself. And so if something isn't working, change something that you're doing.
I love the phrase too, that we are influencing their behavior, versus we are not controlling, we're influencing, right?
Yeah.
Big difference in that particular word. Well, I'd like to take some questions now. If anybody has any questions, you can either just raise your hand or type into the chat box, and then you can answer the question by turning on your audio so that we can hear you. I mean, you can discuss with Robyn if you'd like to discuss anything with her. So I don't see any questions.
Sandra has her hand up.
Sandra.
Hi there.
Hey, hi.
Hello. My question regarding the connector is, it seems to bring an animal into balance when you give it a little bit more room on the leash. How does it react with dogs who are actually dog reactive, and that's when they get out of balance on leash?
Well, actually, really well, because what we see with many dogs that are reactive, it's coming from a place of fear. So when we can help them feel safer, I've seen so many dogs that the reactivity just was so reduced just by putting a connector on. And it gives because what happens is, so the dog is reacting to something. So what does the human do? We pull. That's our natural response to do it. And a single point of contact puts the dog leaning out of balance. And this is one of the things I'll have people notice. If the dog is leaning away from you, how can they come toward you and in your direction until they're able to bring their body over their feet? And they can't bring their body over their feet when they are being held in the other direction. So I find that if I have a dog that's reacting like that, stroke the leash, move your feet. And that's, Diane, such a good thing that you just said that about moving your feet. We need to move our feet. What we do is we pull with our arms. Moving with our feet will extract them. And I have this thing I call the graceful exit. And it's about there's times when you have to just do this quiet extraction, because dogs, there will be times, no matter how careful you are, that dogs go over threshold. Let's be honest. If you expose your dogs to anything other than a very small space, they will be. It's how do you extract them? How quickly do they recover? Recovery rate is everything. And so it's really surprising, Sandra, how well it can work, because I've used this with, like many dogs that are reactive. The first thing you have to do is is have someone work with it in a situation that they're comfortable, right? So that they know how to use it, that in terms of that they don't just get into this reactive state, they can actually be proactive.
Yeah, and,
Cool,
and
thank
putting the dog through the obstacle course work, which we did, also was amazing. You'd have a dog standing at a certain distance away, and then you know, decrease
Same
the
thing.
distance incrementally.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Sorry, Sandra, I didn't mean to jump in on you.
All
Go
good.
ahead.
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, Hope has a question. She says, I'm interested in the head wrap.
Yeah,
Are
so,
there,
yeah.
yeah,
So
are
I'm
there
going to show
examples?
you.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you right now a couple of things that make it really easy. So let's see.
And hi, Hope. Nice to see you here. I remember when we were leading the horse with the wand and the Teaches, I think was her name, and she was like 30 years old or something.
So I started, you can either go and you can get all sorts of headbands. Like this is, these are two like, Alice bands that you like literally put together, the kind of headband you would put on your own head. And you can take two of these, put them together. You can put them around your dog's, over your dog's head and bring one of them forward. Now, it's not meant to make them go blind, to blindfold them. This dog does have little, but that's a really simple one. The other thing is, maybe you have a dog that's even like, some dogs can struggle a little bit with the forehead wrap. Just do a neck wrap. I can tell you that just having a wrap loosely around a dog's neck, not loosely so it's falling off, can make a huge difference to a lot of dogs. So many dogs hold tension through the neck and the top of the back. And just having this on some of the stuff is so surprising. I try things sometimes and I think, oh, this will or won't work. And it has I'm so surprised when it does. So here's another thing, if you can sew it all, because I found that sometimes it's hard to get the right tension with the headbands. You have to go to a lot of dollar stores. I went to the fabric store and this is like, it's this sort of stretchy, it's, I guess, trim for things and so on. And so I just bought it and then I just sewed it, or you can tie it if you want. And then I can just twist it and bring it over the head. It is important that the fabric has some stretch into it. Like, so an ace bandage, that's why we would use those, but sometimes they're too wide. Having some stretch is important because, and this started because when in the past we used to use a lot of head collars before there were any very good harnesses out there to actually influence dogs. We used 2 points of contact with either a collar and a head collar or something, but always 2 points. And to prepare dogs, rather than just slap, whether it's a harness or a muzzle or whatever on them, having this little face wrap or this could be makes such a difference. And I'm sure you've used this over the years, Diane, to help dogs to prepare them for any number of things, or dogs who are constant barkers in the car. Sometimes this little face wrap can make a difference either on the nose, but I found that it's much easier for many dogs to have it just on the forehead and frequently just as effective.
And of course, we have to desensitize it properly. So they're just not, putting it on and hoping for the best. It's a desensitization goes a long way with these head wraps too. I like the head wrap personally better than the muzzle wrap, but the muzzle wrap is very good for, like you said, training to put a muzzle on.
Oh, absolutely. And I mostly use the forehead wrap or the neck wrap. And for me, the most important thing, if you're going to put anything on the nose or even on it's even like the calming caps. I want to have them big enough that the dog can take their paw and actually move it out of the way, because that they don't feel trapped in it. So if a dog pulls a nose wrap off, I don't care. I want them to know they actually can, so that they feel safe enough that it's okay. So then I leave them for a while and then I might put it back on or not.
I see that Cindy Van Vliet has her mic off or on. So I want to make sure that you get to answer a question, Cindy. So Hope said, so is it important that the fabric be stretchy? Yeah. I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
Because think about it, if it wasn't stretchy, we wouldn't be able to move the mouth, right? So if it's stretchy, then there's a lot of movement there.
Yeah, well, and the same with the forehead, and that's why these, these stretchy headbands, I don't know, they don't make them the same way, and that's why I found the fabric store. It's inexpensive, and you can get whatever length that you want.
Well, and can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Cindy.
Hi. Hi, Robin. So good to see you again.
Yeah.
I do a lot, or spend a fair amount of time during sessions trying to remind my clients that their dog needs to know they have a choice. And so just having something as simple as an elastic band rather than just fabric gives them choice. And when you're trying to put something on their face or their head, the natural choice is to resist it. But when they realize there's nothing to resist, now you're building trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's Hope also asked about, is the width of the neck wrap important? Have it relative to the size of your dog if you can, so there's, again, fabric stores, they have sewing, they have bathing suit elastic that's fairly soft too, so but you can get it in narrower widths, or actually, and what somebody just recently told me they were using for a body wrap was, you can see this is really stretchy. It's a kind of trim, but it's a little bit wider. And because I've had so many dogs recently that are super, super touch sensitive. And we want to just gradually, we want to make them really comfortable with it, not just putting up with it, but actually really comfortable. And so chunking it down into the smallest pieces. And, it's interesting. I do use food, but I use it with a lot of, I'm mindful about how I'm using food. If I was using it to train a behavior, it's one thing. But when I'm even helping animals become accustomed to things, I'm careful that I don't use food in a way that food overrides everything, because it isn't always the only answer. And of course, it depends on the dog. So this can be something like this would be great for a neck wrap, or if your dog's quite small, just fold, say, a 2-inch wrap in half, and that'll make it a little bit narrower. So do be mindful, and once again, pay attention to your dog's response.
Yeah, and Hope had asked about the neck wrap, and she did say thank you for your answer before. But is the width important when you're using a neck wrap?
That's what I was just talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're just putting it on the neck. That's a new one to me. So
yeah, there are some dogs that the only wrap that they can start to actually accept is a neck wrap, and that lowers the head. Some of the little bull breeds where they're just so tight and they're so forward going on their chest, there's something that happens when you put it around the neck. Just, obviously it's not hanging, but it's not pulled tight. It's not like a turtleneck around the neck. It makes such a difference. It's so surprising. And, Diane, what's so interesting too is there are lots of dogs that were never okay with even their own collars, right? And so again, that becomes that almost kind of ground zero things, is the neck wrap can help dogs that maybe you're not as comfortable with. They're used to things around their neck, but it doesn't mean they're really that comfortable with it. So it's another.
My question then stemming from all of that would be, how do you get the dog comfortable with the harness?
Oh, because I've done this with so many dogs. So what I do, first of all, I'll use wraps of all kinds of different material. We had a Labradoodle that was on one of our calls, and she was she was really difficult to groom. So the woman who, her guardian was there and the groomer came there and they took it step by step, but she was really not okay. Couldn't wear harness, body wrap, she would just like freeze. So we did some free work, some work with some different elements and some food scattered so the dog had total choice with it. And then she had to be so clever. I said, find some different material for the wrap that she is okay with. So she braided some really soft, like alpaca wool. So it was really stretchy. And she just put that around her a bit. And then she took it off. So just putting it on, taking it off. And then added some touches, like she wasn't okay with things. So we did a little springbok and we did some different touches. And the dog's 100% comfortable now with the harness and with being groomed, 100%. In fact, she's kind of now a T-Touch junkie, but I will show you something else that I have started. And some of you may not know this, but when I put wraps on dogs, I started frequently of putting on from the back to the front instead of from the front to the back. And so I'll start off by doing a little belly lift with the wrap. So I just gently stretch the wrap this way, stretch the wrap, pause, and then slowly release the stretch. And I might do it in a couple of places just to see what's the dog's response to the wraps. And I have been using the wraps. That's the other thing. If you have a dog that's super touch sensitive, is take your wrap and stretch your wrap across the dog a little and then slowly release it. We started this with horses, and horses with kissing spine and all sorts of things could accept this, and across the ribs, and then slowly release it. Incredible how effective it is. So that's kind of digressed, but it's really worthwhile if you have dogs that are touch sensitive, or maybe they've got some discomfort somewhere. So I've done a little belly lift. And then what I'm going to do is I take the wrap across the back, and then just bring this dog around, and then across the front. And then I attach it. And I started this with a dog who was always backing away from her collar or anything, always, anything that came to the front of her, no matter how carefully. And so I started with a belly lift and then carried on around, and she was totally okay with it. And you can also do a half wrap from that. But so I think it's really something to try on a dog, maybe that isn't settling or is a little bit anxious about things. It can be really helpful.
I know your voice is fading out here. We are a little over, but we do have another question from Dawn. Are you seeing?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, does it wrap width around the body? Yeah. So does it matter whether it's narrower or wider? Again, again, depends on the size of the dog. So I would say I generally use for sort of medium to larger dogs, maybe like a 3-inch wrap. And you can use a wrap underneath the harness, or you can use it on top too. I mean, this is another question that's kind of coming up. With smaller dogs, I tend to use like a 2-inch wrap. I might use a 4-inch wrap on a really big dog. I'm not trying to mummify them. I'm simply wanting to bring awareness and allow. What happens is the wrap gives feedback to the body, and that's what we're kind of looking for. It's about giving feedback, not support.
And good feedback.
Yeah. But, feedback about where they are in space, feedback about maybe where they're holding themselves. And it's remarkable. Now, the best thing you can do as a human is wear a body wrap yourself to actually know how it is. And I'm just going to take a second. I'm going to show you the simplest wrap to put on that will help you with your, maybe you are struggling because you're tight. Maybe you sit at the computer a lot like I do, or maybe you're ending up that you get tense in areas. So if you have a 3-inch wrap, I'm going to go through this a little bit slowly. You're just going to take this across your back, I've got a short end is coming over the top of one shoulder, long end under the other arm. I'm going to flip the long end over the same shoulder that it was coming under the back. Now it's stuck to my thing again. And then I'm going to bring it around. And I have these wraps that have Velcro on. Now, what you want, so you see it's across my back. It's not pressing on the back of my neck. You want it to just sit, not tightly, but just be there across your shoulders. And what it does is it reminds you that our shoulders can be a little bit more open because we tend to get really forward in what we're doing. If you walk your dog and you get tense, this will actually help you stay more in balance, because if you're all kind of crunched over, that's not going to make your dog feel very safe either. So this, what we call a shrug wrap, is one of the simplest wraps. And it's important, really important, just like on the dogs, that it's not stretched. It's tight enough to stay on. In fact, this, I'm going to loosen it just a hair, because we really want we really want to just know where we are in space, rather than, it's not about somebody pulling our shoulders back. That's just going to make us sore, and it's going to make us tighten in someone else. So yes, it's absolutely wonderful, Dawn, to remind owners how tense they can be, because the shoulders come forward. It won't pull them back, but it'll just help them remember. But if you have any issues of your own posture, this can help so much. Or if you have to sit at the computer and so on. So anyway,
And you can put it under your clothing so no one will know that.
Exactly. You can totally put it under your clothing.
Mhm. So let's see. I think Dawn said, oh my God, this will be beneficial to remind owners how tense they often are when walking, and they are. I mean, you see, you'll say, are you relaxed? And they'll say yes, and then their knees are like, double, really tight, and their shoulders are like this. And
absolutely. Plus, if you feel something on yourself, it really helps you understand that how it might be helping your animal. It's not going to necessarily help them in the same way, but at least you go, oh, you can have light contact and you can still feel it. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. So any other questions for Robyn this afternoon or morning, wherever you are? Otherwise, we went over a little bit, and so we had, this is so great. I'm so thankful to you both, and I'm thankful to Robyn, and it was wonderful chatting with you again. And thank you all for coming to listen, and you will be better with your dogs tomorrow than you were today. Right?
Thanks, Diane. It's great. Really nice to see you again, and nice to see everyone. Thanks you all for coming.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to end the chat now and say goodbye.